Hi, my name is Nick, and this is my December reading wrap-up. I have 9 books to talk to you about. I have a lot of Litfic, I have some debuts, I have a poetry collection, I have some modern classics. There's a lot to get through, and I'm excited to talk about all of them, so let's get into it. I finally read There by Tommy Orange, which is a book that I've known about for a really long time and kept seeing, but for some reason just never picked up, never thought it was for me. I had an aversion to interconnected stories as novels for a really long time. I don't know why, but now I've really loved them, I really love them. I've loved a lot of them this year, and some of them are some of my favorites, including There by Tommy Orange, which is so good. The novel follows a large cast of characters who are all connected to a powwow that's happening in Oakland. They're connected to it in really different ways. They're connected to their indigeneity in really different ways. It was a really interesting way to talk about all of those things. I found and give it like a lot of different perspectives and color, and it was so well done, so masterfully done. There's so many characters, but I was never confused, and it kind of felt like I was a detective trying to figure out like who is connected to who and how. I had like my little red string and I was just tying them all together, and that's a fun way to read, in my opinion. I really enjoy that because it keeps me really engaged and keeps me just going. I read through this so quickly. It was so delicious. And there's a big crescendo leading up to the end of the novel that was so insane. I had shivers, full body shivers the whole time. I cried. It was so intense, but like so well done and so cool. Like tragic also, and really sad and heartbreaking, but like all of the things at once. It was really, really cool. In my reading notes, I wrote that this book was like a gentle breeze that turns into like a big gust of wind. And that's really how it feels, and it's just so good, and I am just in awe of this. I'm really excited to read Wandering Stars, which is sort of like a continuation of There. It like brings back some of those characters, but also reaches back into the past and into the future. So yeah, I'm really excited about that for the coming year. Pity by Andrew McMillan is a debut from a poet, and it really reads that way, in a good way. It's really beautiful and just like experimental with language, or it plays with language in a way that feels really good. It's like when I read Martyr by Kaveh Akbar, I felt the same way. There's something really interesting about a poet writing a novel and the way that they like conceive of the novel. And I thought that was really at play here. It's the story of 3 generations of men, like working class men in this town in the middle of England that used to be a mining town, but then this big tragedy happened and the mine isn't like a viable source of work anymore. So it's sort of just like this defunct town that used to be something really, really great, but isn't anymore. And the town acts as like another character on the side of this, like these generations of men. But to me, the novel really focuses on masculinity and what it means to be a man in this town. Like what it means to be a man when you can no longer perform the manual labor that you were really good at, and that's the only thing you really knew how to do. What does it mean to be a man when you don't connect to any of the things that the men that came before you are interested in or like or are? What does it mean to be a man when you are a drag queen in this town? Yeah, so many different experiences that are looked at, and I really enjoyed it. It plays with form in a very interesting way. Like there's this CCTV descriptions, there's gossip as prose, which I loved. That was so cool. And also like it gives a voice to the town. Like every single character, the way that they're speaking gives voice to the town in a different way, which I thought was really interesting. And like it's a very short book, and it left me wanting a little bit more, but in a way that I think like either was intentional or just kind of worked for me. Like I was like, I want more, and I was okay with that. Does that make sense? Night Sky with Exit Wounds by Ocean Vuong is a poetry collection from a really talented, amazing writer. It's such a beautiful collection. It really plays with form in interesting ways that I really enjoy. When I'm reading a lot of poetry at once, I like when it's like there's some different things, there's some risks being taken. I really enjoyed that. There's a very contemporary quality to this poetry, which doesn't always work for me. I think it's hard to be contemporary in poetry for me, but I still found it really lyrical and beautiful at the same time, so it was, in my opinion, really well done. After every time that I picked this up, I was left feeling very contemplative And I really considered a lot of the writing, and it felt like it was speaking to me very deeply, which I really loved. I think for me, like the overarching theme that I felt was longing. There's so much longing in this. Longing for love, for family, for connection, all of these, and also like a lot of grief, which was just beautiful to read. And yeah, I think overall, like, gorgeous, so well done. Some of my favorite poems in this are Trojan, Head First, Thanksgiving 2006, and Someday I'll Love Ocean Vuong. Just Above My Head by James Baldwin. This is the last installment in a series I was doing where I was reading every single James Baldwin novel over the course of 2024, and I did do it. I read all of them, and this was the last one, and it wasn't my favorite. I still am glad that I read it, but it wasn't my favorite. Essentially, this novel is about a man named Hall who is recounting us the story of his brother. At the beginning of the novel, we find out that his brother has passed away. His brother was queer, and this like famous artist, and so his life was very different than Hall's, and we get their lives together, their lives separate through these different vignettes over the course of the novel, and it follows all of these characters that are connected to a gospel group that Arthur joined when they were teens. And so you get a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different people, and how they're connected to the brothers, and how they shape the brothers, and all that sort of stuff. This does feel like somewhat of a thesis statement for James Baldwin, for where he was in fiction at this point, because it brings together a lot of different themes that he was exploring in his different works, like faith in Go Tell It on the Mountain and the church, fame and celebrity and what that looks like in Tell Me How Long the Train's Been Gone, and then being queer, being Black in America, all of those things. But it also touches on a lot of heavy topics, some of which I think were done really well, and I got it, and it made sense to me, and then others I didn't like, I didn't love. It made it uncomfortable for me to read it. There was a lot of incest, like, to be blunt. There was a lot of incest, and the incest, like, shifted in the way that it was in the novel throughout. Like, I don't want to give too much away, but essentially, like, it doesn't start off consensual, and then it turns into consent, which is just, it's just, yeah. I don't need to explore incest personally, and I read like a couple think pieces on why there was so much incest in the novel, and I just don't think it was necessary. I still don't think it should have been there in that way. It made it really hard for me to read, but I did get through it, and in the end, the novel is really like a journey of acceptance of the brother to his passed away brother, and like his queerness and who he was and how he was living, and also a journey of self-acceptance through these different vignettes and the stories that we get from their lives of the brother coming to terms with his queerness and what that looks like in like the 60s for a queer Black man. But yeah, it was a hard read. I'm still glad that I read it, and yeah. Permafrost by Eva Baltazar, which was translated by Julia Sanchez, is the first in the triptych from this author, which is like a series of 3 novels that all follow lesbian narrators. And this does feel like the first in the series in a lot of interesting ways. Like, it feels younger than Boulder, which I read and really loved. It feels messier. It feels like a teenage experience, even though it's like young 20s, but it just feels, and all of those things are positive. Like, I thought that was a really interesting depiction of that time and depiction of that kind of experience for a queer person, and it felt so aligned with my personal experience, and so it made a lot of sense to me, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool. It's essentially the story of a young woman who's trying to figure out like herself. She's traveling to all these places looking for something, but we're not even sure what that is. She's not even sure what that is, and so it was really like finding yourself, and yeah, I just really liked it. The writing is amazing. I love the way that Eva Baltazar writes and Julia Sanchez translates. There's something so sharp about it and like real and raw. And I would really recommend this triptych. I'm so excited to read the last. Kind of disappointed I didn't just read it in 2024, but here we are. I'm definitely reading it in 2025. It's called Mammoth. Yeah, I'm excited to read it. Blessings by Chukwuebuka Bay is such a gorgeous debut. It's set in Nigeria between 2006 and 2015, and the end of the novel coincides with the Nigerian government's enactment of the Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act. And so you kind of get like a queer coming of age and also this like really interesting time capsule of this social and political time for a queer character and what that feels like. Just so well done and so beautiful, and I really love this novel. The story follows Obifuna, who is a young boy, and he gets sent to an all-boys boarding school because his father suspects his queerness, and his mother is sort of unable to stand up to his father, unable to like protect him in any way, and you really feel that weight of it throughout the novel, and it's so interesting. In fact, the most interesting part to me to this novel is like the intersection of the mother-son relationship when the son is queer, and sort of like how she is battling with like love but also the norm and what it feels like when your child is outside of the norm. Really difficult, probably not handled correctly to most standards, but really interesting exploration and just really well done. It feels like a lived experience. It feels human. It feels real and raw and just so beautiful. Ugh, yeah. It really had me contemplating like my experience as a youth, because it's like when you know you're different, your experience of that difference, what it is so like it's laid out in this novel really in a really interesting way. But then it's also how the mother is experiencing that difference and noticing it and seeing it and what that also feels like. So it made me think about like what my mother's experience of my difference was when I was younger, and I don't want to know. So anyways, yeah, this is a really gorgeous novel, and I'm so excited to read more from eBay. Oh god, I love this so much. Our Evenings by Alan Hollinghurst is the coming of age of a young queer brown boy living in England from the 1960s to today, and it's his experience being queer, but also how that intersects with class, race, privilege, all of these things that he has like experience with in close proximity, because he goes to a boarding school on scholarship and has this experience of like being in very, very close quarters with a lot of privilege, and a lot of people who are not at all like him and don't understand him and don't care to. It's a really interesting character study, and I did really like the writing. This is my first Alan Hollinghurst, not my last. I'm really excited to read more from him because I read these 500 pages so quickly. I was so immersed in the story, and I think he's a real talent. The initial premise of this novel is that you're gonna get this narrator like intersecting with a conservative politician that was friends with him when he was younger and like grew up to be this like horrible person over the course of his life, but you don't really get that much. But I was kind of fine with that, but I did think like it left me wanting a little bit more of that because that's sort of what I was promised, but in the end I didn't personally need it. I still really enjoyed it. This novel does a really good job of depicting like sexuality and desire as this like hidden thing, and how even as the person who is queer and has these desires, like hiding it from your own self. So interesting. And it also does it for different people. It's like who gets to have desire, who gets to act on their desires when it comes to age and class and race and sex and all of these things. It was a really interesting examination of that, and I'm excited to see what else Alan Hollinghurst has to say, because he's considered to be like one of the modern gay writers who has really like brought that experience to the forefront, and has been doing it in all of his works. So yeah, I'm excited to read more from him. Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stewart. Sad, 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 sad. Bleak, 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 bleak. I had never read this, which felt like bad. Like I felt like I should have read it. And it's always talked about like this very queer coming of age novel. To me, this is a novel about addiction, and this is a novel about how far addiction can stretch and how much it can impact the loved ones of the person who's afflicted with that disease. And so yes, it's a queer coming of, but honestly it's a lot more than that, and it's a lot different. But what I got from it is a lot different than a queer coming of age, and that's a positive thing. So it's the story of a working class family in Glasgow through the 80s and 90s, and the matriarch of the family is an alcoholic, and it essentially paints the portrait of this family in a really interesting way. All the cracks are exposed, but it goes through them with like a fine-tooth comb, and it really dives deeply into all of these people and their connection to each other or disconnection to each other, how they're all reacting to their mother's alcoholism, or their wife's alcoholism, or their girlfriend's alcoholism. This like one central character that everyone is spinning in her orbit. Yeah, it's so bleak, so sad, so heart-wrenching, really raw. It feels like a debut novel in that it's saying so much, and it feels like someone has like lived an entire life in order to say these things. I don't have much more to say. Like, it left me feeling empty in a way that I was thankful for. So I'm excited to read Young Mungo, which is the next Douglas Stewart and has two boys kissing on the cover. Yeah, maybe that one will be super gay. Who knows? I don't actually know what it's about, so I'm excited to read it. Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit by Jeanette Winterson is a queer classic. It's autofiction. It's like a memoir, but fictionalized. And Jeanette Winterson has some really interesting things to say in the introduction about like the line between fiction and nonfiction. And so I don't feel like categorizing it in any way, because she would hate that. But it was really good. The writing in this is so delicious and so perfect. I was highlighting so many passages in the introduction that I was like, I have to stop highlighting because this book will be completely yellow. So I couldn't do that. But the writing is just so good. I can't wait to read more Jeanette Winterson. I have some books of hers that are lined up that I got while I was in the UK. And I really like her writing. This novel tells a story of a young girl who was adopted and grows up in a missionary family, in a very religious family. And this really is more about faith and religion and belief than anything else, in a way that I found so interesting. It dives so deeply into that. I've never read it in this way. And it was like scary, honestly. Being so far removed from religion currently, it really just like freaked me out, but was really effective in that way, I guess. And it's also like, how does it feel when everything that you have had to believe and everything you've known up to a certain point is then completely negated by the fact that you are experiencing yourself as a queer person. So fascinating. Where the novel really shined for me was the intersection of like the mother-daughter relationship and faith. Just so well done, like exceptional, unlike anything else. Just really, really, there's nothing else I can say. I really like this, but it's terrifying to me. So yeah, that's it. Those were the books that I read in December. I'm really excited to keep reading in 2025, to keep sharing it, to keep talking about it. I also really want to talk about my reading goals and challenges that I'm going to set for myself. I have some amazing books lined up that I'm just so excited about, and I can't wait to share more with you. And as always, thanks for watching.